Hi and welcome to episode 4 of our second series of Seafarer mental health training and support videos. In this episode we're focusing on keep learning, one of the 5 ways to well-being. Have you ever set your mind to complete a difficult task, something you've never done before, and finished it? Maybe you built a shed, learned a new song on the guitar, or fixed a toilet for the first time. How did it make you feel? Pretty good, I expect. What about something a bit more difficult? Perhaps you've rebuilt a car, or fixed a motorbike, or learned a different language. Learning takes effort, but it can be incredibly rewarding. When you learn something new or complete a task you haven't done before, it's great for your mental health. Studies have shown that adult learning has been linked to have a positive effect on well-being, life satisfaction and optimism. And it's great for the brain. In this episode, we're going to provide you with 3 activities based on new things. But before we do, I'm going to give you 3 insights about adult learning that might help you. Emotions greatly affect the learning process. Stress is probably the most powerful barrier to learning because it's usually triggered by one or more negative emotions. When adults are stressed because you have a welfare issue at home, or maybe a co-worker is giving you a hard time, you can't really focus. When you can't focus, you can't be successful at learning. It's much better to learn when you're relaxed. More blood flows around your body, giving you a clearer mind and better concentration. Intense focus lasts for 20 minutes. Whilst everyone has different levels of concentration, research suggests that on average, adults can maintain intense focus for about 20 minutes. So if you're learning something, it might help to do it in short bursts, taking breaks in between. It's important you get a good night's sleep. When we sleep, we do a lot more than recharge our batteries. The brain is very active during our downtime phase. It does a lot of information sorting and rewiring of the neural network. After a learning session, this sorting and rewiring is very important for later retention rates. Only after a good night's sleep do we become aware of all the new connections we've made during yesterday's learning. Now we've learnt about learning, it's time to learn something new. This week, our first activity is to learn some origami. Origami is the art of folding paper, usually associated with Japanese culture. All you need to do this activity is a piece of paper and a copy of this week's resource. To do this activity, all you need to do is follow the instructions, but if you want to challenge yourself, you can learn how to do it from memory. To demonstrate, my colleagues Richie Lee and I are going to make a jumping frog, and then our cameraman Tom is going to judge which is the best. So we finished the origami. Tom is now going to judge who is the origami champion.
Oh, I mean, you've all done a great job, I have to say, first time doing it. This one's got quite a few creases. I'm going to mark it down for that. Better, much better. But it's the smallest. It's got the legs and it's got the back legs and it looks most like a frog. It's got to be this one. Whose is that?
That's mine, Tom.
That's yours. You guys disappointed?
Well done. I am the origami champion.
Well done.
It does it, it works.
For our second activity, we're going to revisit one of our most popular activities from the last series, landscape photography. We gave you some tips and asked you to send in some photos. Well, you sent in some great ones. We told you about the golden hour. the hour just after sunrise and before sunset. This brilliant picture that was sent to us perfectly demonstrates just that. We also mentioned foreground and how it can provide depth. This pic is a great example of this. And our last tip was the rule of thirds. This picture shows how, by having the horizon 2/3 of the way up the picture, you don't have too much sky and have enough space to give some foreground interest. So, what are we learning in this episode? Well, it's something that we saw in probably our favourite photo that you sent. It is the use of dynamic lines. I'll hand over to our cameraman Tom, who will explain in more detail.
A very powerful method of improving your photos is the use of lines. Diagonal lines can convey a sense of action or make an image more dynamic. For this reason, diagonals are a very powerful tool. Their power resides in their ability to catch the attention of the viewer. The viewer's eyes tend to travel back and forth along the diagonals. Examples of diagonals are plentiful. Waves, the shape of a ship, the coastline are but a few examples of objects that can be utilised in a diagonal manner. I'm going to give you an example of how using diagonal lines can make your photographs look more dynamic. Here's a picture of the pier where we've been filming today. I've used the rule of thirds to make a nice landscape shot. Now here's a picture of the same pier, but the pier is at an angle. This creates more depth and the picture is more dynamic. Now it is possible to take this one step further. In this picture, we photographed the pier from an elevated position. This means we are looking at it from both the side and from above, making it look more three-dimensional and giving it more volume. This can help a picture look more real and dramatic. If you enjoy photography, try using interesting dynamic lines in your photographs. Send them to us using the phone number on the screen, and there's a good chance we'll put them in a future video. And as always, the information for this activity will be in this week's resources.
That brings us on to our third and final activity of this episode: learn how to play a board game. We know learning is good for the brain, and so is playing board games. It's a good way to socialise with a colleague and combat boredom on board, and studies have shown that playing board games makes us feel happier. No matter what kind of ship you're on, there should be board games. We're going to teach a very simple one, which a lot of you will know, but many of you won't. It's checkers. In case you don't have a chess set and checker pieces on board, we're supplying you with a printout of a chessboard in this week's resources. And if you don't have the checkers pieces, you can find something to play with. We've got 12 silver coins and 12 bronze coins to use as our counters. I'm going to take you through the rules. It's really simple. We'll supply a copy of the rules along with the board in this week's resources. First, the setup. Each player places their pieces on the 12 dark squares in the first 3 rows closest to him or her. Each of these 3 rows should have a total of 4 checkers. The row closest to each player is called the king row. That's the setup done. Dead easy. Now to play. The opponent with the darker pieces moves first. Pieces may only move one diagonal space forward towards their opponent's pieces in the beginning of the game. Pieces must stay on the dark squares. To capture an opposing piece, jump over it by moving 2 diagonal spaces in the direction of the opposing piece. A piece may jump forward over an opponent's pieces in multiple parts of the board to capture them. Keep in mind the space on the other side of the opponent's piece must be empty for you to capture it. If your piece reaches the last row on your opponent's side, you may retake one of your captured pieces and crown the piece that made it to the king's row, thereby making it a king's piece. Now this king's piece can move forwards or backwards, still only one square at a time, unless capturing an opponent's piece. The first player to capture all opposing checkers from the game board wins the game. So that's it. It's really simple and it's very easy to learn, so why not give it a go? So that's it for this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, the resources will be made available to you on board. If you want to take part in any of the activities, have a look at those to refresh your memory. In the next episode, we're wrapping up this series of the 5 ways to wellbeing, and we're looking at the action give and why it's good to be kind. See you then.